When you look back at the biggest leaps in human progress, penicillin, the microchip, the internet, none of them came from fear. They came from curiosity, from people asking what's possible, not what should we protect. Tariffs often seem like a quick solution, an economic lever that can be pulled to immediately support local industries, correct trade imbalances, or respond to unfair practices abroad. They're politically attractive because they offer the appearance of strength and decisive action, but the truth is, tariffs are a short-term fix to much deeper and more complex structural problems. They don't solve the underlying challenges that a country faces, they mask them, and in the process, they often make it harder to pursue the real, long-term solutions that actually drive growth. When governments impose tariffs, they're essentially applying pressure to external systems in the hope that internal systems won't have to change. It's a strategy based more on control than on creativity. But the global economy doesn't respond well to control. It responds to innovation. Industries don't get stronger by being shielded from competition. They get stronger by being forced to evolve in the face of it. That's how progress works. Think about any breakthrough that has truly moved society forward. It didn't come from a protective policy. It came from someone pushing boundaries. The issue with tariffs is that they can dull that instinct. They can create a sense of complacency, an illusion that the playing field has been tilted in one's favor. So there's no need to innovate, no need to get better, no need to change. That's incredibly dangerous in a world where change is constant and where stagnation is a slow path to decline. Tariffs can also have unintended ripple effects. They increase costs, not just for consumers, but for manufacturers who rely on global supply chains. They introduce uncertainty, which discourages investment and long-term planning. And they invite retaliation, which can spiral into prolonged trade disputes that benefit no one. Economies don't thrive on uncertainty. They thrive on clarity, cooperation, and forward momentum. Tariffs often do the opposite. They stall progress while pretending to protect it. The most fundamental problem, though, is that tariffs address symptoms, not causes. If an industry is struggling, it's rarely because of imports. It's often because it hasn't adapted quickly enough to new technologies, new markets, or new consumer needs. Using tariffs to protect that industry doesn't fix the real problem, it just delays the reckoning. It's like treating a fever without treating the infection. You might feel better temporarily, but the underlying issue is still there, growing stronger. What actually works is investing in the capacity to compete. That means better education systems, so that workers have the skills to thrive in a changing economy. It means research and development, so that companies are pushing the edge of what's possible. It means infrastructure and digital connectivity, so that entrepreneurs can access markets efficiently. These things take longer. They don't fit neatly into a news cycle, but they're the foundation for sustainable, long-term economic strength. There's also a deeper cultural element to this. When a society turns to tariffs as its primary economic strategy, it often signals a mindset of fear. Fear of being outcompeted, fear of the unknown, fear of change. But great economies don't grow from fear. They grow from confidence, from the belief that if given the right tools, the right environment, and the right support, their people can build something better than what currently exists. That belief is far more powerful than any tariff. There's a place for trade policy. Rules should be fair. Partners should be held accountable. But the first instinct should never be to pull back and protect. It should be to push forward and invest. Because the countries that do that are the ones who don't just survive economic transitions. They lead them, they set the pace, they shape the future, and they benefit the most from the innovations that follow. So when we talk about the future of work, the future of industry, the future of prosperity, we should focus less on what we're protecting and more on what we're building. Tariffs may seem like tools of strength, but real strength comes from within. It comes from a society's ability to evolve, to compete, and to keep moving forward, even when the pressure is on. Especially then. In the end, the challenge isn't to keep the world out. It's to build something so compelling, so competitive that the world wants in, and that requires more than trade barriers. It requires vision, it requires investment, and above all, it requires the courage to bet on innovation instead of fear. If you study the arc of human progress, one pattern becomes unmistakably clear. It's innovation, not protectionism, that drives real, lasting economic growth. The countries, companies, and individuals that have consistently moved forward are the ones who took risks on new ideas, not the ones who tried to hold back the tides of change. When you innovate, you're expanding the boundaries of what's possible. When you protect, you're often just trying to preserve something that's already on the decline. Look at any meaningful transformation in history: the Industrial Revolution, the rise of personal computing, the biotechnology boom. These weren't made possible by putting up trade barriers or insulating local industries from global competition. They were the result of investments in technology, education, and open systems that allowed the best ideas to flourish, regardless of where they came from. Growth didn't come from shielding businesses from competition. It came from giving them the tools and freedom to outcompete. Innovation brings with it something that protectionism can't: scalability. An invention or breakthrough doesn't just solve one problem. It creates a platform for more discovery. A new material might lead to better batteries, which lead to better devices, which lead to better day. A collection in healthcare or climate science. One advancement creates opportunities across sectors. This kind of compound growth doesn't happen in closed systems. It depends on openness, on shared knowledge, and on a willingness to collaborate across borders. Protectionism, by contrast, is a reactive approach. It tries to freeze the economic landscape in place, to hold on to a moment that may no longer be relevant. That's not how the world works anymore. We live in a time where industries evolve rapidly, where technologies can leapfrog over traditional infrastructure, and where access to new markets is just a few clicks away. Trying to shield domestic economies from global forces may feel safe, but it almost always backfires in the long run. It discourages companies from adapting. It rewards stagnation instead of excellence. What makes innovation so powerful is that it doesn't just create economic output, it creates capability. It gives people the ability to solve their own problems, to improve their own communities, to build new businesses that address needs that couldn't even be imagined a decade ago. That's the foundation of healthy, resilient economic systems, not just wealth, but the ongoing capacity to generate new solutions to emerging challenges. In fast, growing economies around the world, you can see this play out clearly. Places that are doubling down on research, entrepreneurship, and digital infrastructure are pulling ahead, not because they're protecting what they already have, but because they're building what comes next. They understand that the global economy rewards speed, creativity, and adaptability, not insulation, and they're preparing their people accordingly through education, upskilling, and access to technology. There's also a moral element to this. Innovation tends to distribute opportunity more broadly when done right. It allows a kid with a laptop and a good idea to compete on the same playing field as a multinational corporation. It democratizes access to tools that used to be available only to the privileged few. Protectionism, on the other hand, often ends up concentrating advantages in the hands of those already in power. It preserves the status quo. Innovation breaks it open. Economic growth isn't just about GDP, it's about solving the real problems that hold people back. Clean energy, accessible healthcare, quality education, sustainable food systems. These aren't things you get more of through tariffs or subsidies to outdated sectors. You get them by investing in new thinking, by supporting the inventors, scientists, and entrepreneurs who are actively trying to make things better, cheaper, and more efficient. That's where the next wave of jobs, industries, and opportunities will come from. And while it's tempting to think of growth in national terms, the truth is that the most valuable innovations are rarely confined by borders. A breakthrough in one country improves life in another. A vaccine developed on one continent saves lives on another. A software tool built by a remote team in 5 different time zones becomes the foundation for a business that didn't exist the year before. That kind of interconnected progress doesn't happen in a world focused on protection. It happens in a world focused on invention. So when we think about the future of economic growth, the question shouldn't be how to shield ourselves from change. It should be how to enable more of it, how to create the conditions where bold ideas can thrive. That means removing barriers to entry, not adding them. It means fostering competition, not fearing it. And most of all, it means believing that the best way forward is through constant learning, relentless experimentation, and the unshakable belief that we haven't yet reached the limits of what we can build. Progress doesn't happen in isolation. The most impactful breakthroughs, whether in science, technology, health, or energy, have come not from individual efforts working behind closed doors, but from collaboration across borders, disciplines, and institutions. When people come together from different parts of the world, bringing diverse perspectives and expertise, the pace of innovation accelerates in ways that are almost impossible to achieve through isolated efforts. Global collaboration isn't just a nice idea. It's a necessity for solving the kinds of problems we now face. When one country makes a discovery that knowledge doesn't stay confined within its borders, it travels, it becomes part of a larger shared understanding that everyone can build on. This is how science evolves. This is how technology scales. A researcher in Germany may build on a paper written by a team in South Korea, who themselves were inspired by findings from a lab in Brazil. That chain of shared knowledge turns isolated insights into global progress. And the more open and connected that chain is, the faster we move forward. Some of the most remarkable advancements in recent years came from precisely this kind of global effort. The rapid development of COVID-19 vaccines is one example. Researchers across multiple continents shared data in real time. Companies partnered across borders. Governments coordinated funding and policy. Within months, the world had multiple viable vaccines, something that would have taken years without that level of collaboration. It was a powerful demonstration of what we can achieve when we don't let geography or politics get in the way of science. But this isn't just about pandemics. It's about everything, from climate change and clean energy to food security and AI safety. These are problems that no single nation, no matter how wealthy or powerful, can solve alone. They require global thinking. They require trust. They require systems that make it easier for people in different countries to work together, to share insights, to challenge each other's assumptions, and to arrive at solutions that are better than any one group could create on its own. There's a practical advantage to global collaboration too. Not every idea needs to be reinvented from scratch. If a solution is working in one region, adapting it to another is often faster and cheaper than starting over. Why build a new water purification system when one already exists that could be improved and scaled? Why re-engineer a solar panel when teams elsewhere are already working on the next generation of materials? Sharing solutions saves time, it saves money, and more importantly, it saves lives. At the heart of global collaboration is humility, the recognition that good ideas don't have a passport. Talent is everywhere. Innovation can come from any corner of the world. The more we make space for that talent to contribute, the better off we all are. That means building systems that are inclusive. It means removing barriers to participation, whether those are financial, educational, or political. And it means valuing contribution over control. One of the quiet revolutions happening right now is the rise of digital tools that make this kind of collaboration easier. Open source platforms, shared research databases, remote work technologies, these tools are connecting people who might never have had a chance to work together before. A teenager in Nairobi can now contribute code to a project started in Stockholm. A farmer in India can use a mobile app developed in Silicon Valley, then offer feedback that improves it for millions. This feedback loop, enabled by connectivity, is what makes progress scalable and inclusive. Of course, global collaboration isn't always smooth. It takes work to build trust across cultures. It requires patience to navigate different regulatory systems, different languages, different timelines, but the payoff is worth it. When we choose to work together instead of separately, we multiply our capacity to solve big problems. We create a sense of shared purpose. We start to define progress not just by national outcomes, but by human ones. What we do now matters. The challenges ahead, whether it's the transition to clean energy, the future of healthcare, or the ethics of emerging technologies, demand a level of cooperation we've only just begun to explore. The old model of progress, where each country focused narrowly on Its own advancement is no longer sufficient. The new model is one of shared intelligence, shared risk, and shared reward, because in the end, progress is not a zero-sum game. One nation's success doesn't come at the expense of another's. In fact, it's often the opposite. When one part of the world makes a leap forward, the rest can follow. When we lift up others, we all rise. That's the real power of global collaboration. It's not just a way to move faster, it's the only way to move forward. Economic resilience doesn't come from trying to lock the doors and keep change out. It comes from building the internal capacity to adapt quickly, intelligently, and creatively. And that capacity is rooted in three things: education, research and development, and entrepreneurship. These aren't just abstract ideas or long-term goals. They're the foundation of any economy that wants to thrive not only today but in the decades to come. If you want a real defense against job loss, declining industries, or global competition, invest in minds, not in walls. Education is the starting point. It's where every potential inventor, engineer, entrepreneur, and problem solver begins their journey. But it's not enough to simply get more people into classrooms. The question is, what are we teaching them, and how are we preparing them for a world that's constantly evolving? A curriculum that's built around memorization and rigid rules won't prepare students for the fluid, fast-changing demands of modern industries. What's needed is an education system that fosters critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and resilience, the kind of skills that aren't easily automated or outsourced. When people learn how to learn, they stay adaptable. They don't just survive change, they lead it. That learning has to continue beyond school. Economies that thrive are the ones that treat knowledge as a lifelong investment. Reskilling, upskilling, and adult education should be seen as basic infrastructure, not optional programs, because the pace of technological change means that what you know today might not be enough tomorrow. A healthy economy makes it easy for people to evolve with their industries instead of being left behind by them. But education alone doesn't drive innovation. It needs a counterpart: research and development. This is where ideas are tested, refined, and translated into real-world impact. R&D is what turns theories into technologies and concepts into companies. When a country consistently invests in scientific discovery and applied research, it builds a pipeline of future breakthroughs. Some of these will come from universities, some from private labs, and some from public-private partnerships, but the common denominator is a commitment to exploration, to asking big questions, to chasing possibilities that may not pay off in a quarter or a year, but could fundamentally change the landscape in a decade. R&D is also how economies move from dependency to leadership. It's the difference between importing innovation and creating it. It's what separates economies that react from those that shape the future, and it has a multiplier effect. A single advancement in material science or medicine can lead to dozens of spin-off technologies, hundreds of startups, and thousands of jobs. That kind of ripple effect doesn't come from protectionist policy. It comes from supporting the people willing to take intellectual risks, which brings us to entrepreneurship. If R&D is where ideas are born, entrepreneurship is how they grow. Entrepreneurs are the ones who see a new possibility and decide to build something real around it. They don't wait for permission. They create the companies that bring innovation to market, often faster and more effectively than legacy institutions. But they can only do this if the ecosystem supports them. That means access to capital, clear and reasonable regulation, mentorship networks, and a culture that rewards boldness over conformity. Entrepreneurship thrives where failure is seen not as a dead end but as part of the process. That mindset is crucial, because not every idea will succeed, but the act of trying, iterating, and learning is what pushes industries forward. An economy that celebrates calculated risks, taking ends up generating far more opportunity than one that tries to avoid all mistakes. It creates the conditions where the next generation of leaders can emerge, not because of inherited advantage, but because of ingenuity and persistence. Together, these three elements, education, R&D, and entrepreneurship, form a system. They feed into each other. Educated individuals fuel research. Research produces insights. Entrepreneurs turn those insights into Products and services that meet real needs, and when that system is healthy, it creates a self-reinforcing loop of growth, resilience, and adaptability. That's the true engine of economic strength. In a time when global competition is fierce and rapid change is the norm, it's tempting to look for quick fixes, but the most effective defense against uncertainty isn't retreat, it's investment. Not in outdated structures, but in the people and ideas that will build what comes next. The economies that understand this will not only weather disruption, they'll define what comes after it. When you look at the engines of progress throughout history, it's rarely policy makers who have been the driving force. Instead, it's the problem solvers, the scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, and innovators who have shaped the future. The people who ask the hard questions and refuse to accept the status quo, the ones who see challenges not as barriers, but as invitations to create something better. This isn't to say policy has no role, but the future belongs to those willing to experiment, to iterate, and to push beyond established norms, rather than clinging to policies rooted in the past. Policy makers often operate with the intention of stability and control, aiming to preserve what already works. That's understandable. Governments are tasked with protecting citizens and maintaining order. But the problem is that in a rapidly changing world, the what already works is often a relic of a different era. When policies prioritize preservation over progress, they risk stifling innovation and locking in inefficiencies. This creates an environment where industries and economies become brittle, unable to adapt when disruption inevitably comes. Innovation doesn't thrive in an environment of excessive regulation or rigid frameworks. It thrives in spaces where creativity is encouraged and failure is seen as part of the learning process. Problem solvers are willing to take risks that policy makers often shy away from. They push boundaries because they understand that breakthroughs come from experimentation, sometimes messy, sometimes uncertain, but always necessary. The pace of change today demands that mindset. Waiting for perfect policy or complete consensus can mean missing the window of opportunity entirely. Take the technology sector as an example. Much of what drives economic growth now comes from startups and new ventures that operate outside traditional regulatory frameworks, at least initially. They develop new products and services that address unmet needs or create entirely new markets. Governments can eventually catch up by updating rules, but it's the innovators who move first, who explore uncharted territory, who lay the groundwork for what comes next. When policy tries to hold back these forces, it often ends up hindering progress rather than helping it. This dynamic doesn't mean policy is irrelevant. Thoughtful regulation can create the frameworks needed for innovation to scale responsibly, ensuring safety, fairness, and public benefit. But the balance must tilt toward enabling problem solving rather than restricting it. That requires a different approach to governance, one that embraces experimentation, supports R&D, and partners with innovators rather than trying to dictate from above. It means recognizing that no one has all the answers and that policies should evolve as fast as technology and society do. The challenges we face today, climate change, global health crises, economic inequality, are complex and interconnected. Solving them requires more than policies designed for yesterday's problems. It requires new ideas, new approaches, and new tools. Problem solvers see these challenges as opportunities to rethink assumptions and build systems that are more resilient and inclusive. They bring fresh perspectives that policy makers, bound by precedent and bureaucracy, often struggle to adopt quickly. Moreover, problem solvers don't just invent new technologies, they build ecosystems. They create networks of collaboration that span disciplines, sectors, and geographies. These ecosystems accelerate discovery and deployment of solutions. The future belongs to those who can harness this collective intelligence rather than those who try to control it. This shift is already visible in fields like clean energy, artificial intelligence, and digital health, where open innovation and cross-sector partnerships are driving rapid progress. Another important point is that problem solvers are usually closer to the ground. They experience first, and the problems they're trying to solve. They are customers, workers, or community members themselves. This proximity gives them insights that are often missing in high-level policy discussions. They are motivated by impact, by tangible outcomes, not just by abstract principles. This focus on practical results fuels continuous improvement and responsiveness to real-world needs. Ultimately, clinging to policies from the past risks locking economies into outdated models. It limits the ability to respond to new opportunities and threats. In contrast, embracing problem-solving fosters adaptability, the ability to pivot, to learn from failure, and to seize emerging possibilities. This adaptability is what separates economies that grow and thrive from those that stagnate and fall behind. So, as we think about the future, the real question is, where do we want to place our bets? On policies designed to protect old ways of doing things, or on empowering the problem solvers who will invent the future? The answer seems clear. The future belongs to those who innovate, who challenge assumptions, and who build solutions that move society forward. Policies should support and amplify these forces, not suppress them. Because at the end of the day, progress is not made by holding on to what was, but by embracing what could be. So we have a choice: keep playing defense, or start building the future. A future defined not by what we're afraid to lose, but by what we dare to create. The real wealth of a nation isn't stored in its trade policy. It's in its capacity to invent, to imagine, to build. Tariffs might protect. Yesterday, innovation builds tomorrow, and tomorrow is where we're all headed. Let's make sure we arrive prepared.